Step into my trench, and I'll show you the weapon that rewrote the rules of war.
The Maxim MG-08 was not merely a piece of military hardware. In the context of World War I, it became one of the defining symbols of an entirely new kind of warfare. Before 1914, battles were still largely imagined in terms of rapid cavalry charges, infantry advancing in lines, and short engagements where mobility could decide the outcome. But the MG-08, the German Army's standard heavy machine gun, represented a turning point. It embodied the industrial, mechanical, and relentless nature of the war that would become known as the Great War. Its origins went back to the late 19th century. The MG-08 was essentially a licensed German version of Hiram Maxim's revolutionary design. Maxim's original concept had changed warfare: a recoil-operated, water-cooled, belt-fed machine gun capable of sustained fire far beyond the capacity of human muscle alone. By the time the German Army adopted it in 1908, the design was mature, reliable, and, crucially, perfectly suited to defensive warfare. When the war began in August 1914, armies on both sides carried an almost romantic expectation of quick victories. The MG-08 would help shatter those illusions. Mounted on a heavy sled-type carriage and operated by a two-man team, one to fire, the other to feed the ammunition and maintain the water cooling, it could deliver up to 450 rounds per minute in a steady rhythm. With its distinctive water jacket surrounding the barrel, it could fire for long periods without overheating, provided the crew kept the water topped up. In a fixed position, properly supplied with belts and water, it could hold back an entire company of attacking infantry. The MG-08 quickly became more than just a tool, it was a psychological presence. Soldiers advancing toward German lines knew that somewhere ahead, hidden behind sandbags or in reinforced dugouts, the steady clatter of its mechanism awaited them. Its sound, a metallic and repetitive pounding, became part of the soundscape of the Western Front. It was not a weapon of surprise but one of inevitability. Once it opened up, it forced opponents to seek cover or suffer devastating losses. Historically, the MG-08 was part of a broader shift. World War I was not just fought between men, it was fought between industries. The German arms industry could produce these weapons in quantity, and the standardization of the MG-08 meant that spare parts, training, and ammunition supply were all simplified. This industrial efficiency made it possible for Germany to equip its defensive lines with overlapping arcs of machine gun fire. The MG-08 was heavy, about 69 kilograms with its mount and water, but this weight did not matter in the static warfare that emerged. In fortified positions, mobility was far less important than endurance and reliability. In the early months of the war, machine guns were often deployed in open fields or positioned to support advancing troops. But as both sides dug in, the MG-08 found its natural role, anchored in the defensive systems that stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border. Here, it could cover no man's land with interlocking fields of fire. Even when not actively firing, its mere presence deterred enemy movements. Artillery might soften a position, but unless the MG-08 teams were knocked out, they could quickly reman their guns and continue the defense. The gun's role in shaping tactics cannot be overstated. Before the war, European armies still taught infantry to advance in large, close formations. Against rifles, this might work. Against an MG-08, it was disastrous. The machine gun forced armies to rethink their doctrine, to embrace smaller units, creeping advances, and the use of cover. It also made night raids, smoke screens, and artillery coordination essential. In this way, the MG-08 was not just a weapon but a teacher, one that instructed the world's militaries in the grim lessons of modern combat. For German soldiers, serving on an MG-08 crew could be a source of pride. They were entrusted with a key element of the defense, often positioned at crucial points in the line. The gun required skill to operate smoothly. Feeding the cloth ammunition belts, clearing jams, and keeping the cooling system functional under fire demanded discipline and teamwork. Crews often decorated their positions with makeshift comforts, wooden planks to stand on above the mud, sandbag walls reinforced with corrugated metal, even personal effects from home. Yet their lives were also dangerous. The enemy understood the importance of machine gun nests and targeted them with snipers, mortars, and artillery barrages. One of the enduring images of the MG-08 in historical records is its sled mount. Unlike the wheeled carriages of some Allied designs, the sled was stable and low to the ground, making it ideal for trench positions. It could be dragged short distances by its crew, but its weight meant that moving it under fire was always a challenge. This lack of mobility would eventually lead to the development of lighter models, such as the MG-08-15, intended to give German troops a more portable option. But the original MG-08 remained in service throughout the war, performing the role it was built for, delivering sustained fire from prepared positions. As the war dragged on into 1916 and 1917, the MG-08 became a fixture in Allied intelligence reports and memoirs. British and French soldiers knew it by sight and sound. Its water jacket and distinctive silhouette often appeared in trench sketches and propaganda illustrations. For those attacking German lines, spotting an MG-08 position was both a relief and a problem. Relief, because knowing where it was meant you could plan to avoid it. A problem, because avoiding it was not always possible. In major offensives, such as the Battle of the Somme or Passchendaele, MG-08 teams played a significant role in blunting assaults, holding ground even when artillery had torn the surrounding terrain into chaos. The MG-08's historical significance is also linked to the broader technological race of the war. By 1914, every major power had machine guns, but their deployment and integration into strategy varied. Germany's consistent doctrine of using them to reinforce defensive lines, rather than scattering them across units, meant they could create zones of concentrated fire. This doctrine was one of the reasons why offensives so often failed to achieve breakthroughs, even when supported by massive artillery bombardments. The MG-08 exemplified the defensive dominance that defined much of the war's middle years. In the cultural memory of World War I, the MG-08 holds a paradoxical place. On one hand, it was a marvel of engineering, a reliable, effective tool that performed exactly as designed. On the other, it became a symbol of the stalemate and destruction that consumed a generation. It was part of the machinery that turned battlefields into landscapes of mud, wire, and shattered trees, where progress was measured in yards gained at great cost. When the war ended in 1918, the MG-08 did not vanish. Many were captured and studied by the Allies. Others remained in service with various nations, adapted for different purposes or stored in arsenals. The design's influence extended beyond Germany. The principles behind its operation informed the development of machine guns in the interwar years. In museums today, an MG-08 often sits behind glass, its once functional form now frozen in time. Visitors may pause to consider its history, imagining it not as a static object but as a part of a living, breathing war machine. From a historical perspective, the MG-08's story is not just about mechanics or tactics. It is about the transformation of warfare from the 19th to the 20th century. It represents the moment when technology outpaced tradition, when the courage of soldiers was met by the cold efficiency of industrial firepower. It also underscores the human side of technological change, how individuals adapted, how armies learned, and how the experience of confronting such weapons shaped the generations that followed. In the context of World War I, the MG-08 can be seen as both a cause and a consequence. It was a cause in the sense that its presence reinforced the defensive strategies that prolonged the stalemate. It was a consequence in that its widespread adoption was the result of decades of innovation and military planning leading up to 1914. Its role in the war was inseparable from the conditions of the conflict itself. Entrenched lines, vast supply networks, and the industrial capacity to produce and maintain complex machinery under the stress of total war. Even today, more than a century later, the MG-08 is frequently mentioned in discussions about the war's technological landscape. Historians use it to illustrate the nature of trench warfare, the interplay between offense and defense, and the way industrialized nations equipped their armies for a new kind of conflict. In reenactments and historical displays, it serves as a tangible link to the Great War, a reminder that the past was not just shaped by grand strategies and political decisions, but by the tools that soldiers carried into battle. Looking back, the MG-08's legacy is not about glorifying the weapon itself, but about understanding the environment it helped create. It speaks to the challenge of adapting human institutions to rapid technological change. It reflects the reality that, in the first great conflict of the modern age, the balance of power often lay not with the largest armies or the boldest maneuvers, but with the entrenched positions anchored by machine guns like the MG-08. In the end, the MG-08 remains one of the most recognizable and studied weapons of World War I. It was not the only machine gun of the era, nor the most portable, but it was emblematic of the war's defining features: industrial scale, defensive dominance, and the reshaping of military thought. Its story is part of the larger narrative of a conflict that changed the course of history, leaving lessons that would resonate far beyond the battlefields where its metallic rhythm once echoed. If you want, I can also prepare a shorter, punchier version optimized for viewer retention on YouTube, keeping all the historical accuracy but with more cinematic narration flow. That would make the 10-minute runtime feel even more gripping.